My mother-in-law falsely accused me, claiming the baby I'm carrying isn't her son's, but the DNA results I revealed made her face go pale with fear. The silence felt like a guillotine when my mother-in-law stood at my baby shower and announced, "This child might not even be my son's." Time seemed to splinter as 50 pairs of eyes darted between us. The pink and gold balloons suddenly looked garish against the tension choking the room. 3 years I'd spent swallowing her barbed comments. 3 years watching my husband transform from my defender to her puppet. But in that crystalline moment of public humiliation, something within me, dormant and dangerous, finally awakened. I reached into my purse with steady hands, producing an envelope I'd been carrying for weeks. "I had a feeling you'd say that," I said, my voice unexpectedly calm as I handed her the prenatal paternity test. Geraldine Walker thought she knew everything about power. She was about to learn she'd underestimated the wrong woman. It's funny how a moment can change everything. One minute you're smiling for photos beneath pink and gold balloons surrounded by gifts and well wishes. The next you're watching your life unravel like a poorly tied bow. That's what happened at my baby shower, the day I realized my marriage wasn't what I thought it was. My name is Eloise Thorne, Ellie to most people, not Ellie Walker, mind you. I'd kept my last name after marrying Bennett, much to my mother-in-law's dismay. But that was just one item on Geraldine Walker's long list of disappointments when it came to me. The community center looked beautiful that Saturday afternoon in May. Rowan, my best friend since college, had transformed the modest space with fairy lights, fresh flowers, and handmade decorations. It wasn't the country club Geraldine had pushed for, but it was perfect to me, warm, welcoming, and within our budget. "It looks amazing," I told Rowan as she adjusted a banner that read, "Welcome, Baby Walker. Thank you for doing all this." "Don't thank me yet," Rowan said, glancing toward the entrance where Geraldine had just arrived, her critical gaze already sweeping the room. "Your mother-in-law is here, and she's brought reinforcements." I followed her gaze and felt my stomach tighten, not from the baby kicking, but from anxiety. Geraldine stood in a tailored cream pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly salary as a children's librarian. Behind her were faces I recognized from Bennett's family photos, plus one I hadn't expected, Clara Mitchell, Bennett's ex-girlfriend from before we met. "What is she doing here?" I whispered. Rowan squeezed my hand. "Don't let her ruin your day. This is about you and your baby girl, not her power plays." I nodded, but already felt the familiar knot forming in my chest. For 3 years of marriage, I had tried to win Geraldine's approval. For 7 months of pregnancy, I'd endured her thinly veiled criticisms about everything from my prenatal diet to my decision to work until my due date. But inviting Clara, that was a new low, even for her. "Ellie, darling," Geraldine air-kissed both my cheeks, her perfume expensive and overwhelming. "This place is quaint. I suppose it has a certain charm in a budgetary sort of way." "Thank you for coming, Geraldine," I said, my practiced smile firmly in place, "and for bringing everyone." "Well, family is family," she said, emphasis on family as if to remind me I wasn't really part of hers. "And Clara's practically family. She and Bennett were together for so long, it seemed wrong not to include her for closure." "You understand." I didn't understand, not at all, but I nodded anyway, the way I always did. The first hour passed in a blur of games and small talk. I found myself watching Bennett, wondering when he'd stop stepping in to defend me from his mother's jabs. Once he'd been my champion, the man who'd swept me off my feet with his kindness and wit. We'd met at a charity book drive I'd organized through the library. He donated a box of classics and stayed to help sort books all afternoon. I fell for his gentle humor, his passion for architecture, the way he listened when I spoke about my dreams of writing children's books someday. Those early days had been magical, late-night conversations about everything and nothing, weekend trips to small coastal towns, cooking disasters that ended in takeout and laughter. Even when he'd introduced me to Geraldine 6 months in, her cool reception hadn't bothered me much. Bennett had been firmly on my side then. "She'll warm up," he'd promised after that first stilted dinner at her mansion in the hills. "Mom's just protective. Dad left when we were kids, and she had to fight for everything we have." But Geraldine never warmed. Instead, she found subtle ways to undermine me, questioning my modest upbringing in a small town, dismissing my career. Isn't that more of a hobby than a profession, dear? Expressing shock when I kept my maiden name after the wedding. How modern of you. I suppose traditions mean little these days. And Bennett gradually shifted from defender to mediator, then finally to bystander. That's just Mom's way became his refrain. She doesn't mean anything by it. But she did, we both knew she did. Ellie, Rowan's voice pulled me back to the present. Time for the wishing tree. The wishing tree was Rowan's idea, a small potted tree where guests could hang cards with wishes for the baby. I watched as friends wrote heartfelt messages about courage, wisdom, and joy. My colleagues from the library wished for a love of books and endless curiosity. When it was Geraldine's turn, she scribbled something quickly, then muttered to her sister loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "I wish the child has strong walker genes." Though looking at Ellie, one wonders. Several uncomfortable glances were exchanged. I felt heat rise to my face but pressed my lips together. 3 years of these comments had taught me that responding only made things worse. Clara approached the tree next, looking uncomfortable but determined. Her card took longer to write. As she hung it, our eyes met briefly, something like guilt flickered across her face before she turned away. "You're handling this like a champ," Rowan whispered, appearing at my side with a glass of sparkling cider. "Though if you want me to accidentally spill something on Geraldine's designer suit, just give the signal." I laughed despite myself. "Thanks, but I'm fine." "Really?" "You shouldn't have to be fine at your own baby shower," Rowan said. "And why is the X here?" "That's crossing a line." "Apparently she's practically family," I mimicked Geraldine's haughty tone. "Well, I don't like it," Rowan said. "Something feels off." Before I could respond, Bennett appeared, looking handsome but tense in a light blue button-down that matched the shower's color scheme. He kissed my cheek mechanically. "Everything okay?" he asked, though his eyes kept darting to where his mother stood holding court with relatives. "Perfect," I said. "Your mother invited Clara." That was unexpected. A flash of something, guilt? Alarm, crossed his face before he composed himself. "Oh yeah, Mom mentioned that. I didn't think she'd actually do it." "But you didn't stop her." Bennett sighed. "Let's not do this now, Ellie. It's supposed to be a happy day." "Happy, right?" I'd been trying for happy for 7 months while fighting morning sickness, sciatica, and the growing realization that my husband was drifting further from me with each passing day. "It's time for cake," announced my sister-in-law Jessica, one of the few walkers who'd ever shown me genuine kindness. Everyone gathered around the dessert table where a beautiful cake stood, decorated with delicate sugar flowers and tiny golden stars. I positioned myself front and center, determined to at least make a good show of it for the photos. Just as Jessica handed me the cake knife, Geraldine tapped her champagne flute with a silver spoon. The crystal-clear ring silenced the room. "Before we all celebrate," she said, her voice carrying that aristocratic lilt she'd cultivated over years of social climbing, "should we talk about the fact that this child might not even be my son's?" The room froze. 50 pairs of eyes swung between Geraldine's triumphant face and my stunned one. I felt the knife slip from my fingers, I heard it clatter against the plate. In the corner of my vision, I saw Rowan start forward, fury in her eyes. But something in me had finally, irrevocably snapped. With hands that didn't even tremble, I reached into my purse and pulled out a sealed envelope I'd been carrying for weeks. Ever since Geraldine had made a passing remark about certain people who trap men with pregnancies, I'd known this moment would come, perhaps not so publicly, but inevitably. I walked to Geraldine and placed the envelope in her manicured hands. "I had a feeling you'd say that," I said, my voice soft but clear in the deathly quiet room. "So I took the liberty of getting a prenatal paternity test. The results are in your hands now, Geraldine. Would you like to open it, or shall I?" The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. 50 guests held their breath as Geraldine stared at the envelope, her face, usually so composed, twisted with rage and disbelief. "You're bluffing," she hissed. "This is empty." "Open it and see," I replied, surprised by my own calm. With shaking fingers, she tore open the envelope. The medical letterhead was unmistakable. Her eyes darted across the page, then widened. The paternity test was clear. Bennett was unquestionably the father. "This is a forgery," she shrieked, flinging the paper to the ground. "Some cheap trick." "It's from Westlake Medical Center," I said. "You can call Dr. Hayes directly if you'd like verification." As Geraldine sputtered incoherently, I turned to Bennett. He stood frozen, his face pale. This was his moment to step up, to finally stand between me and his mother's cruelty. I waited, heart pounding, for him to say something, anything, to defend me, to condemn her behavior. But Bennett remained silent. His eyes dropped to the floor, avoiding mine. And that silence was the real revelation of the day, not Geraldine's accusation, which I'd half expected for months, but my husband's utter failure to protect me or our child. "I think the shower is over," I announced to the room. "Thank you all for coming." Guests began gathering their belongings in awkward haste, murmuring condolences or avoiding eye contact entirely. Rowan appeared at my side, one arm protectively around my shoulders. "I'm taking you home," she said firmly. "No," I responded, surprised by my own decisiveness. "I think I need some time alone." As people filed out, I caught glimpses of their reactions: Jessica's horrified embarrassment, Clara's strange mixture of guilt and relief, various relatives' barely concealed fascination with the scandal. Geraldine remained rooted in place, her social mask completely shattered. Bennett finally approached me as the last guests disappeared. "Ellie," he began, his voice low. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" I cut him off. "That you sat there while your mother accused me of infidelity in front of our friends and family? That you didn't say one word in my defense? You didn't give me a chance," he protested. "You had that test ready. You knew this was coming and didn't tell me. And you didn't notice anything wrong with that picture?" I asked incredulously. "That your pregnant wife felt she needed a paternity test on standby because she knew your mother would publicly question your child's legitimacy?" Bennett ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. Now it just seemed like a stalling tactic. "Mom's been under a lot of stress lately with the family business," he said weakly. "She shouldn't have said that, but nothing," I interrupted. "I'm going to Rowan's for a while. I need space to think." His face darkened. "You're overreacting. Running away won't solve anything." "I'm not running away," I said. "I'm protecting our daughter from this toxic environment while I figure out what to do next." As I gathered my purse and the few presents I could carry, memories flooded back, warning signs I'd ignored over the years of our relationship. Bennett had been so attentive at first. He called when he said he would, remembered small details about my likes and dislikes, surprised me with my favorite books. But things shifted after we got married. He became distant, distracted. Phone calls from his mother took precedence over our plans. Weekends increasingly featured obligatory dinners at Geraldine's estate. When I announced my pregnancy, I'd hoped it would bring us closer. Instead, Bennett retreated further. He missed doctor's appointments, showed little interest in setting up the nursery, and most tellingly, he began taking mysterious lunch meetings that ran long and left his collar smelling of unfamiliar perfume. I'd confronted him once about Clara. "Are you still in contact with her?" "Of course not," he'd said too quickly. "That's ancient history." I believed him because I wanted to, because the alternative meant admitting I'd made a terrible mistake in marrying him. Now, as I walked out of the community center with Rowan, leaving behind a demolished baby shower and shattered illusions, I felt oddly liberated. The constant pretense of the perfect marriage to the perfect man from the perfect family had exhausted me for years. "You can stay with me as long as you need," Rowan said as we drove away. "No pressure, no timeline." I nodded, throat too tight for words. Later that evening, after settling into Rowan's guest room, my phone lit up with messages, most from well-meaning friends checking on me, a few from Bennett's relatives, some sympathetic, others clearly taking Geraldine's side. But the text that made my hand tremble came from Bennett himself. "You humiliated our family today. Mom is devastated. We need to talk about how you're going to make this right." Not an apology, not concern for my feelings or our daughter's future, just worry about family reputation and his mother's feelings. I didn't respond. The next morning, more revelations came. Rowan's cousin worked at the same architectural firm as Bennett and had overheard him in a heated conversation with Clara in the parking garage. He lied to me, I said, staring at my untouched breakfast. He's been seeing her all along. Not necessarily romantically, Rowan cautioned, but yes, he lied about cutting contact. I spent the next week in a daze, alternating between grief and rage. Bennett's calls became increasingly demanding, then threatening. He mentioned custody arrangements, lawyers, how my emotional instability might impact my fitness as a mother. When I finally agreed to meet him for coffee, it was solely to gauge where his head was at. The man who slid into the booth across from me was a stranger wearing my husband's face. "You've made Mom the laughingstock of her social circle," he said without preamble. She had to cancel her charity gala because people are talking about how she publicly accused her daughter-in-law of cheating. "I wonder why," I said. Bennett's jaw tightened. "You should apologize." "For what? Having proof I've been faithful? For standing up for myself after years of her snide comments and your silence?" "You're twisting everything," he snapped. "This is exactly why Mom worries about you raising our daughter, these emotional outbursts." "Stop," I said, suddenly too tired to continue. "Just stop. I'm not apologizing to someone who tried to destroy my reputation, and I'm not coming home until you recognize how deeply wrong this all is." His eyes narrowed. "Then maybe we need to discuss more formal arrangements." The threat hung in the air between us. That night, unable to sleep, I checked social media, something I'd been avoiding since the shower disaster. What I found made my blood run cold. A distant cousin of Bennett had added me to a private family Facebook group months ago, and I'd forgotten about it. Scrolling through recent posts, I discovered I was the main topic of discussion. Geraldine had been busy sharing manipulated screenshots of texts, spinning wild tales about my mental health, positioning herself as the concerned grandmother fighting a disturbed daughter-in-law. Worse, Bennett had participated, liking comments and adding his own, "We're considering full custody if she keeps spiraling. The baby deserves stability." I screenshotted everything, hands shaking with fury and fear. They were building a case against me before our daughter was even born. The next morning, I called in sick to work and made 2 appointments, one with my obstetrician to document my excellent prenatal care and mental health, and another with a family law attorney Rowan's sister had recommended. "This is just precautionary," I told myself as I sat in the attorney's waiting room. Things couldn't possibly get that bad. But they did. The prenup I'd signed 8 months before our wedding had seemed reasonable at the time, even romantic in a practical sort of way. Bennett had presented it as a formality his family required, something to protect the architectural firm's assets. "It's just to make Mom happy," he'd said, sliding the document across our kitchen table one evening. "Sign it and we never have to think about it again." Now, 3 years later, that hasty signature was coming back to haunt me. "This is unusually restrictive," said Patricia Morgan, the family attorney I'd hired. She adjusted her reading glasses as she flipped through the document. "Did you have independent counsel review this before signing?" I shifted uncomfortably. Bennett said his family lawyer had made it fair for everyone. Patricia's expression told me everything I needed to know. "According to these terms, you're entitled to almost nothing in a divorce: no alimony, limited child support, no claim to the house you've been living in together." She looked up, her eyes sharp, "And there's language here about moral conduct that's troubling, very subjective, very easy to manipulate." My stomach dropped. "What does that mean for custody?" "It complicates things," she admitted, "but prenups can't definitively determine child custody. That's always based on the best interest of the child. Still, I'm concerned about their apparent strategy to question your stability." I left the meeting with a growing sense of dread. The Walkers were powerful, connected, and clearly willing to play dirty. What chance did I have, a children's librarian with modest savings and a baby on the way? That evening, I made a call I'd been avoiding. Mr. Lanning had been my father's closest friend, a retired attorney who'd helped settle Dad's small estate after he passed away 5 years ago. He'd always told me to reach out if I needed anything. Ellie, his warm voice greeted me. It's been too long. How are you, my dear? When I finished explaining my situation, there was a long silence on the line. Bring me everything, he finally said. Every document, every message, everything with the Walker name on it. And don't tell anyone you're meeting with me. 2 days later, I sat in Mr. Lanning's home office, surrounded by papers. His silver eyebrows drew together as he studied the prenup. There's something odd here, he muttered, flipping pages. References to a family trust I've never seen mentioned in public records. He looked up sharply. Did Bennett ever discuss a Walker family trust with you? I shook my head. He mentioned inheritance matters were complicated because of how his grandfather had set things up, but he never gave details. Mr. Lanning nodded thoughtfully. Let me make some calls. I still have friends in corporate law who owe me favors. A week passed before he called me back, his voice urgent. We need to meet, not at my house, the coffee shop on Maple tomorrow at 10. The next morning, Mr. Lanning slid a folder across the table to me. The Walker Family Trust is quite the document, he said quietly. Established 3 generations ago with strict bloodline clauses. In layman's terms, it dictates that family wealth passes only to legitimate Walker descendants. Legitimate, I repeated, the word leaving a bitter taste. Their definition, not mine, he clarified. And here's where it gets interesting, your pregnancy triggered a clause regarding potential heirs. According to the trust, your daughter stands to inherit a significant portion, more than Bennett would, if she's acknowledged as a true Walker. Understanding dawned slowly, then all at once. That's why Geraldine questioned paternity at the shower. It wasn't just about humiliating me, it was about money. Mr. Lanning nodded grimly. Worse still, there's a provision that any heir must be approved by the current trustees, Geraldine and Bennett, to receive their inheritance. They're using my daughter as a pawn in some twisted family game, I whispered. There's more, he said, pulling out another document. I found an unsigned revision to the trust dated last year, before your pregnancy announcement. It would have changed inheritance patterns significantly, limiting the share any grandchild could receive. So they were planning this before we even conceived, I realized, anger building in my chest. It appears so, Mr. Lanning agreed, but without signatures, this revision isn't legally binding. Someone pulled it before execution. As I digested this information, my phone buzzed with a text from Rowan, call me now. You need to hear something. I excused myself and stepped outside to call her. I just ran into Clara at Northside Bar, Rowan said without preamble. She was drunk and bragging to friends about still being in the picture with Bennett. Said she had an understanding with his mother. The pieces were falling into place, Clara's presence at the shower, Geraldine's accusations, Bennett's secret lunches, the trust revision. It wasn't just about control, it was a coordinated effort to push me out. That night, after tossing and turning for hours, I made a decision. The lake house the Walkers owned had been Bennett's grandfather's pride and joy, family gatherings were always held there. I knew from casual comments that Geraldine and Clara were meeting there this weekend for what Bennett had described as a family reunion planning session. I had a key, I had determination, and now I had a plan. The lake house sat empty when I arrived early Saturday morning. The gathering wasn't scheduled until afternoon, giving me time to plant a small digital recorder in Geraldine's preferred sitting room, hidden inside a decorative box she never opened but always kept close for sentimental reasons. I left before anyone arrived, drove to a nearby town, and waited. What I was doing probably skirted legal boundaries, but I was beyond caring about niceties, my daughter's future was at stake. When I retrieved the recorder the following Monday after everyone had left, my hands trembled as I plugged in headphones and pressed play. Clara's voice came through first, unnaturally sweet, just worried about timing. The baby comes in 2 months. That's why we need to accelerate, Geraldine replied. The trust provisions are clear. If we can document emotional instability before birth, we strengthen Bennett's custody case significantly. But she seems fine, Clara said hesitantly. The paternity test backfired. People break, dear, Geraldine's voice hardened. Everyone has a breaking point. We just need to find hers. Once she's pushed out completely, things can proceed as planned. And Bennett? A pause. My son will do what's best for the family. He always has. There was more, detailed discussions of staging an emotional breakdown, manipulating mutual friends, even plans to have someone check my work performance at the library. I felt sick listening to it, but also vindicated. This wasn't paranoia, it was conspiracy. With the recording secured, I made one more call to a number I'd found in Bennett's old contact book months ago but had never used. Ellis Walker, answered a cautious male voice. This is Ellie Thorne, I said. Bennett's wife. I think we need to talk about your mother. There was a long pause before Ellis replied, I've been waiting for this call for 3 years. Tell me everything. Ellis had left the family under mysterious circumstances 5 years before I met Bennett. All I knew came from whispered comments and quickly changed subjects when his name came up. Bennett had once let slip that his younger brother had betrayed the family by challenging the trust terms, but I never learned the details. We met at a diner halfway between the city and the small coastal town where Ellis now lived. He looked like a rougher, more weathered version of Bennett, same dark hair and strong jaw, but with weary eyes that had seen too much. She did the same to me, Ellis said after I explained my situation. Different circumstances but same playbook. Mother isolates her target, turns the family against them, then strikes when they're vulnerable. What did she do to you? I asked. Ellis sighed. I fell in love with someone she didn't approve of. Mark was everything I wanted but nothing she would accept. Because he was a man? I realized. Partly that, but more because he was a public school teacher from a working-class background, not Walker material, Ellis said bitterly. I told her I didn't care about the money, so she switched tactics, threatened his career, his family. I left to protect him and lost everything in the process. I'm sorry, I said softly. Don't be. I rebuilt my life on my own terms, but I've been waiting for someone to finally stand up to her. Ellis said, let me help you. Together we formulated a plan. Ellis still had access to certain family records through a sympathetic aunt. Within days he'd located something potentially game-changing, an unsigned version of the trust revision I'd learned about, but with handwritten notes in the margins. It's in Geraldine's handwriting, Ellis confirmed, showing me scanned copies. These notes outline exactly how to manipulate the trust to divert funds away from any grandchildren she doesn't personally approve of. If these notes were presented to the trust's oversight board, they might question her fitness as trustee, I finished. At minimum, Ellis agreed. At best, they might remove her entirely. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope, not just for financial security, but for freedom from Geraldine's manipulation. The baby kicked as if sensing my change in mood. We'll need more than just documents, I said, resting a hand on my swollen belly. We need a strategy that protects my daughter completely. Ellis nodded, his expression determined. Then let's build one. Mother spent decades perfecting her methods of control. It was time someone finally beat her at her own game. As I drove back to Rowan's that evening, I felt a strange sense of calm. The road ahead would be difficult, possibly ugly, but now I had something I'd been missing: allies who understood what I was facing, evidence of wrongdoing, and most importantly, the absolute certainty that I was fighting not just for myself, but for my daughter's future. The Walker family had built their legacy on secrets and control. It was time to bring it all into the light. The morning after meeting with Ellis, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. My back ached from Rowan's guest bed and my ankles were swollen from pregnancy, but my mind was sharp and focused. For too long I'd been reacting to Geraldine's schemes, now it was time to fight back. My first call was to Patricia Morgan, the family lawyer. This time I brought everything: the recorder with Geraldine and Clara's conversation, the trust documents Ellis had uncovered, screenshots of the Facebook group where they'd plotted against me, and my own detailed journal documenting 3 years of subtle abuse. Patricia's eyes widened as she reviewed the evidence. This changes everything, she said, tapping the recorder. They've essentially admitted to conspiracy. We can use this to challenge any custody petition before it even begins. I want to be thorough, I told her. I need to protect my daughter completely, not just temporarily. She nodded, understanding the gravity of what I was asking. Then we'll build an ironclad case. Document everything, every text, every call, every interaction. Start keeping a timeline journal with dates, times, and exactly what was said. That night I began my journal. It wasn't just a legal document but a testament to what had happened, what was still happening. I wrote down every dismissive comment Geraldine had ever made, every time Bennett had failed to stand up for me, every manipulation I could remember. The entries stretched back years. March 15, 2022, dinner at Geraldine's. She accidentally spilled red wine on my white dress after I mentioned applying for the children's programming director position at the library. Bennett laughed it off as mom being clumsy despite having never seen her spill anything before. November 22, 2022, Thanksgiving, Geraldine seated me next to the kitchen door away from Bennett. When I tried to join conversation about the family business, she interrupted, "Darling, no one expects you to understand investments. Why don't you tell everyone about those little children's books you read at work?" December 24, 2023, Christmas Eve, Geraldine gave everyone personalized gifts except me. I received a generic department store scarf with the price tag still attached. When I thanked her politely, she said, "No need to pretend you like it. We all know you're only here for what Bennett can provide." The patterns were clear when laid out chronologically: the isolation, the public humiliation, the constant undermining. I had normalized it all, telling myself it wasn't that bad, that all in-laws had tensions. Seeing it written down made me wonder how I'd endured it so long. 2 days later my phone buzzed with a calendar notification: OB appointment at 2 p.m. I hadn't told Bennett about it, yet when I arrived at Dr. Hayes' office, a familiar cream-colored pantsuit caught my eye in the waiting room. Geraldine. She stood, her face arranged in a mask of concern. "Ellie, darling, I've been so worried about you." Several pregnant women looked up, curious about the elegant older woman approaching me with outstretched hands. "What are you doing here?" I asked quietly, conscious of the public setting. "Can't a grandmother-to-be show concern?" Her voice was syrupy sweet, but her eyes remained cold. "After your episode at the shower, I've been beside myself thinking about the stress you're under. It can't be good for the baby." My hand moved instinctively to my pocket where my phone sat ready to record. I pressed the button through the fabric. "My episode," I repeated, keeping my voice steady. "You mean when you publicly accused me of infidelity and questioned my child's paternity?" Geraldine waved a dismissive hand. Water under the bridge. I was emotional. We all say things we don't mean sometimes. The important thing now is getting you the help you need. Help? Support, darling, medical support, emotional support. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "I've spoken with Dr. Hayes about your condition. He agrees that monitoring your mental health is crucial at this stage." Ice ran through my veins. "You spoke to my doctor about me without my consent?" Her smile never wavered. "Family concerns, dear. Bennett signed the permission forms as your husband." Before I could respond, a nurse called my name. Geraldine squeezed my arm, a gesture that might look affectionate to observers but felt like a warning. "We'll talk more soon. Bennett and I have some suggestions for after the birth, living arrangements, support systems. It's all for the baby's well-being." I pulled away and followed the nurse, my heart pounding. Once in the examination room, I immediately told Dr. Hayes what had happened. "I never spoke to your mother-in-law," he said, frowning, "and we have no permission forms from your husband. That would violate HIPAA regulations." "She's lying," I said, not surprised but still shaken, "and planning something." Dr. Hayes made notes in my file. "I'm documenting this incident, and I'm implementing additional privacy measures for your records." He looked up, his expression serious. "Ellie, this sounds like more than family drama. Are you safe at home?" The question caught me off guard. Was I safe? Physically, yes, but in every other way. "I'm staying with a friend for now," I told him, "and I'm working with a lawyer." He nodded. "Good. But focus on your health and your baby." Let me worry about your medical information. After the appointment, I sat in my car and listened to the recording I'd made. Geraldine's voice was clear, the lies undeniable, another piece of evidence for Patricia's growing file. That evening I started a different kind of project, a memory box for my daughter. Inside I placed ultrasound photos, a journal of my pregnancy, and a new addition, a video diary. Your story begins before you, I said to the camera, my voice steady despite the tears threatening. And I want you to hear it from me, not through whatever narrative others might create. I want you to know I fought for you, for us, from the very beginning. Over the next week my counter-offensive took shape. With Patricia's guidance I filed paperwork to freeze the joint accounts Bennett and I shared. Rowan, working her connections at the real estate office where she was an agent, discovered something troubling. Bennett had taken out a second mortgage on our house 3 months earlier. The co-signer was Geraldine. They're liquidating assets, Patricia said when I showed her the documents, preparing for a legal battle they expect to get expensive, or hiding money. Ellis suggested during our next meeting, classic move when someone's anticipating divorce. With each discovery my resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about breaking a cycle of manipulation that would otherwise continue into my daughter's life. I made my next move carefully, using an anonymous email account. I sent select audio clips and screenshots to key members of the Walker extended family, particularly those with connections to the Trust's oversight board. I included no accusations, no explanations, just raw evidence with dates and times. The response was immediate. Bennett's phone calls increased, his messages oscillating between rage and desperate pleas. Whatever you think you're doing, stop it, he demanded in one voicemail. You're only hurting yourself. And then 3 days later, please, Ellie, can we just talk? This has all gone too far. I didn't respond to either. When he finally showed up at Rowan's doorstep on a rainy Tuesday evening, I agreed to speak with him but only on the front porch with Rowan watching through the window. Bennett looked terrible, unshaven, hair unkempt, dark circles under his eyes. For a moment I felt a pang of the old affection, remembering the man I'd fallen in love with, but that man was either gone or had never truly existed. You've been talking to Ellis, he said without preamble. Yes. And sending things to the family. Also yes. Bennett ran a hand through his disheveled hair. You don't understand what you're doing, the trust, the family dynamics. It's complicated. Actually, I understand perfectly, I replied. Your mother is using our child as a pawn in her control games, and you're letting her. It's not that simple, he protested. Mom has certain expectations, traditions that matter to her. Traditions like publicly humiliating your wife? Like conspiring with your ex-girlfriend to question your child's paternity? Those traditions? His face darkened. You're twisting everything. You've always been so sensitive about Mom. And you've always defended her, no matter what she did to me. The realization that had been building for months finally crystallized. You know, I've been asking myself when you changed, when you stopped being the man I married, but maybe you never were that man. Maybe you were always her son first and my husband second. That's not fair, he said, but his eyes shifted away from mine. We come from different worlds, Ellie. You never really tried to fit into mine. The comment stung because it revealed the truth. Despite 3 years of bending over backward to please his family, I'd never been accepted because I wasn't supposed to be. I wasn't their level, as Bennett had just implied. You're right, I said, surprising him. We do come from different worlds, and I'm glad our daughter will know both. The world where people are valued for their kindness and character, not their bank accounts or family names. As I turned to go back inside, Bennett grabbed my arm. This isn't over, Ellie. Mom's talking to lawyers about grandparent visitation rights. I pulled away. I'm counting on it. Tell her I look forward to playing the recording of her conspiracy with Clara in court. His face paled. What recording? I didn't answer, just closed the door between us. Later that night, as I added the interaction to my timeline journal, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Ellie, it's Clara. Clara Mitchell. I think we need to talk. I met Clara at a quiet cafe 20 minutes outside town, somewhere Geraldine's social circle wouldn't frequent. She was already there when I arrived, nervously shredding a napkin, her designer handbag perched beside her like a shield. "Thank you for coming," she said as I lowered myself carefully into the booth, my 8-month pregnant body making every movement deliberate. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted, "but I'm curious why Bennett's ex-girlfriend suddenly wants to chat." Clara winced at the description. "It's complicated. That seems to be the Walker family motto." She managed a weak smile. "You're not wrong." She took a deep breath. "Look, I didn't expect any of this to go so far. Geraldine approached me months ago, said she wanted to reconnect for old time's sake. It seemed harmless at first, lunches, the occasional text. Then she started talking about you. Let me guess, I was unstable, gold-digging, not good enough for precious Bennett." Clara nodded. Almost word for word. She made it sound like she was concerned about Bennett's happiness, about the family legacy. She hesitated. "Then came the money." "She paid you?" "Not directly." Clara stared into her untouched coffee. "She invested in my interior design business, sent clients my way, made me feel like I was part of the Walker inner circle again. In exchange for what?" "Information at first. Did I ever see you around town? Who were your friends? Had I heard anything about your relationship?" She looked up, guilt evident in her eyes. "Then she asked me to reconnect with Bennett, said it would be good for him to have an old friend during this stressful time." The calculated manipulation was so typically Geraldine that I almost laughed. "And the baby shower invitation, her idea?" "She wanted to create tension to see how you'd react under pressure." Clara reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "But this crossed a line." She tapped the screen and turned it toward me. A video played, Geraldine in her immaculate living room, Clara looking uncomfortable on the couch across from her. "It's simple, dear," Geraldine was saying. "All you need to do is sign an affidavit stating you and Bennett have been reconnecting since before Ellie's pregnancy announcement. The wording will be carefully chosen, suggestive but not explicitly claiming an affair." "But that's not true," Clara's voice objected off camera. "Truth is malleable," Geraldine waved dismissively. $10,000 now, another 15 when the custody arrangements are finalized, plus continued promotion of your little business." My hands clenched involuntarily. "When was this recorded?" 3 days ago, Clara said, reclaiming her phone. "After you mentioned a recording to Bennett," Geraldine panicked, started making contingency plans. "And you decided to record her because—" "Self-preservation," Clara admitted. "I realized I was being set up as the fall guy. If things went south, I'd be the homewrecker, the perjurer, she'd deny everything and Bennett would back her up. He always does." I studied her face, looking for deception but finding only tired resignation. "Why show me this now?" "Because it's gone too far," she said simply, "and because I remembered something my mother told me after Geraldine pushed me out of Bennett's life the first time. That woman destroys what she can't control. I don't want to help her destroy another family." The video was damning, clear evidence of attempted fraud, conspiracy, and witness tampering. Combined with the lake house recording and trust documents, we now had enough to force a serious legal confrontation. 2 days later that confrontation took shape in the form of a mediation session requested by Patricia. Bennett, Geraldine, Clara, Ellis, and their respective attorneys gathered in a conference room at Patricia's firm. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Geraldine sat ramrod straight in an ivory suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, her face a mask of indignant superiority. Bennett looked uncomfortable but determined, his lawyer whispering constantly in his ear. Clara had come alone, perched nervously at the far end of the table. Ella sat beside me, a solid presence that seemed to irritate Geraldine more than anything else. "We're here to discuss a path forward regarding custody arrangements and financial matters for Ellie Thorne and Bennett Walker's child," Patricia began calmly. Bennett's lawyer immediately interrupted. "My client has serious concerns about Miss Thorne's stability and fitness as a primary caregiver." "Interesting," Patricia replied, sliding folders to each person at the table, "because my client has serious concerns about a coordinated campaign of emotional abuse and financial manipulation." As they opened the folders, I watched their faces. Bennett blanched at the transcripts of the lake house conversation. Geraldine's expression remained frozen as she flipped through screenshots of the Facebook group and trust documents. Only when Patricia played the audio recording of her offering Clara money for a false affidavit did her composure finally crack. "This is absurd," she hissed, standing abruptly. "I will not sit here and be ambushed with illegal recordings and out-of-context statements." "The recordings were made in single-party consent states," Patricia countered smoothly. "Perfectly admissible in both civil and criminal proceedings." "Criminal?" Bennett's voice cracked. "Conspiracy, witness tampering, attempted fraud. Shall I continue?" Patricia raised an eyebrow. "And that's before we address the trust irregularities that Mr. Ellis Walker has documented." At the mention of Ellis, Geraldine's face contorted with rage. "You," she spat. "You've always been determined to destroy this family." "No, Mother," Ellis replied calmly. "I've been determined to save it from you." He slid a document across the table, the unsigned trust revision with Geraldine's handwritten notes. "I've already submitted this to the Trust's Oversight Board," he continued, "along with evidence that you've been manipulating trust assets for personal vendettas. They've temporarily frozen your access pending investigation." The color drained from Geraldine's face. "You can't do that, I am the primary trustee." Ellis corrected. "As of this morning, your trustee status is suspended." Geraldine stormed out, her lawyer hurrying after her. Bennett remained, looking shell-shocked as the full implications sank in. Clara spoke for the first time since the meeting began. "I'm willing to provide a sworn statement about everything Geraldine asked me to do." Bennett turned to her, betrayal written across his face. "You too?" "I'm sorry, Bennett," she said softly, "but this has to stop." The meeting continued for another hour, establishing preliminary terms. I would have primary custody, Bennett would have supervised visitation until a court-appointed evaluator deemed it safe for unsupervised time, and Geraldine would have no contact with our child without my explicit permission. As we left the conference room, Bennett approached me one last time. "This isn't what I wanted," he said, his voice low. "What did you want, Bennett?" I asked, genuinely curious. "A wife who never stood up for herself? A child you could mold into another version of your mother?" He had no answer. In the weeks that followed, the Walker family empire began to fracture. The trust investigation uncovered years of manipulation, with Geraldine using family funds to reward loyalty and punish dissent. Several board members resigned, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Bennett's architectural firm lost clients as whispers spread through their social circle. Throughout it all, I focused on preparing for my daughter's arrival. The nursery at Rowan's house took shape, a peaceful space with soft yellow walls and a hand-painted mural of a forest scene that Ellis helped create during weekend visits. One afternoon, I found myself alone at the house organizing baby clothes donated by friends from the library. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Geraldine standing there, looking older and somehow smaller than I remembered. "May I come in?" she asked, none of her usual imperial manner present. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside to let her enter. She carried a small package wrapped in silver paper. "I won't stay long," she said, her voice subdued. "I just wanted to give you this." I accepted the package wearily but didn't open it. "I've had time to reflect," Geraldine continued, looking around Rowan's modest living room with none of her usual disdain, "to consider what's been lost." "And what have you concluded?" I asked, keeping my distance. She met my eyes directly for perhaps the first time. "That I was wrong about many things." She gestured to the package. "That's a letter for you and eventually for your daughter. Read it or burn it, that's your choice now." Before I could respond, she turned to leave, pausing at the door. "I've withdrawn the petition for grandparent rights," she said quietly. "Some bridges can't be rebuilt. I see that now." After she left, I sat with the unopened package for a long time, feeling the weight of it in my hands. Finally, I set it aside on a high shelf. Whatever it contained, apology, explanation, or final manipulation, it could wait. Today wasn't about Geraldine, it was about preparing for my daughter's future, a future free from the toxic patterns that had nearly consumed me. 2 weeks later, on a clear morning in April, I gave birth to Aster Thorne, 7 pounds 4 ounces of fierce determination and delicate beauty. As I held her for the first time, Rowan beside me and Ellis waiting in the hall with flowers, I whispered a promise. Your story begins with strength, little one, and it will only get stronger from here. The first months with Aster were a blur of midnight feedings, tiny discoveries, and a bone-deep exhaustion I hadn't known was possible. But through it all ran a thread of pure joy, the kind that catches you by surprise in ordinary moments. The first time she gripped my finger, the way her eyelids fluttered during dreams, the perfect round shape of her head beneath my lips. We settled into a rhythm. Aster and I. Rowan had insisted we stay with her until I was ready for what's next, and I was grateful for both the practical support and the breathing room to figure out our future. Bennett had been oddly quiet since the mediation. His lawyer communicated requests for visitation, which I granted under the supervised conditions we'd agreed upon. During these brief encounters at the visitation center, he seemed like a stranger, awkward with Aster, formal with me, unsure of his place in our lives. After the third such visit, he lingered as I prepared to leave. She has your eyes, he said, watching as I bundled Aster into her car seat. And your chin, I replied automatically. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. I'd been in therapy, he offered suddenly, trying to understand everything. I nodded but said nothing. I failed you, he continued. I see that now. I let Mother dictate my life for so long that I forgot how to think for myself. Part of me wanted to offer comfort, to say it wasn't entirely his fault, but that would have been another kind of dishonesty. I hope the therapy helps, I said instead. Aster deserves a father who can make his own decisions. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement of his efforts, of the possibility of change. It was all I could offer for now. As spring melted into summer, I gradually reclaimed pieces of my former life. I returned to work at the library 3 days a week. Aster happily settled in the on-site daycare where I could visit during breaks. I found a small apartment with a garden courtyard, nothing fancy, but clean and bright, and most importantly, ours. One evening as I was logging Aster's milestones in her baby book, I remembered the journal I'd kept during those dark days before her birth. I dug it out from a moving box and reread the entries, the fear, the determination, the slow-building strength I'd found within myself. On the final blank page I wrote, "You were always mine." It wasn't just about biology or paternity tests, it was deeper than that, a recognition that this child, this life we were building together, had always belonged to us alone, not to the Walkers' expectations or Geraldine's schemes. The thought sparked an idea. The next day at work I approached Rowan, who had recently taken over our library's community programming. I want to create an exhibit, I told her, called Letters to Our Daughters, Women Sharing Wisdom, Hopes, Warnings, the things they wish someone had told them. Rowan's eyes lit up. I love it. Will you contribute? Mine's already written, I said, thinking of my journal. It's about finding your voice when everyone expects silence. The exhibit opened in September, transforming a corner of the children's section into a colorful gallery of framed letters, photographs, and small artifacts. Women from across the community contributed, young mothers, grandmothers, aunts, mentors. My journal entry, edited and expanded, held the center spot. On opening night, as visitors circulated through the display, my phone buzzed with a notification from the security system I'd installed at the apartment. Bennett was at the door outside his scheduled visitation time. I called Rowan over. Can you watch Aster for a few minutes? I need to handle something. Everything okay? She asked, already reaching for the baby. I think so, just unexpected. The drive home took less than 10 minutes. Bennett was still waiting when I arrived, a manila envelope in his hands. This couldn't wait? I asked as I unlocked the door, gesturing for him to enter. I didn't want to do this during a supervised visit, he explained, following me inside but remaining near the entrance. It didn't seem right. He handed me the envelope. Inside was a legal document, a petition to the court. You're contesting custody? I asked, heart racing. The opposite, Bennett said quietly. I'm formally requesting that the supervision requirement be continued indefinitely, at my expense. I looked up, confused. Why? Because I don't trust myself yet, he admitted. I'm still untangling years of patterns, and Aster deserves better than half measures. It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. For the first time since the baby shower, I felt a flicker of respect for him. Thank you, I said simply. He nodded. There's something else. I ran into Clara last week. My guard instantly went back up. She's moving across the country, San Francisco. Said she needed a fresh start. He hesitated. She left a message for you. He handed me a sealed note card. Inside Clara had written, I hope one day you find peace. I'm still looking for mine. After Bennett left, I stood in my quiet apartment considering how much had changed in a year. The competent young architect I'd married was now a humbled man relearning how to exist outside his mother's influence. The woman who had once seemed a romantic rival had become briefly an unlikely ally, and I had transformed from someone who swallowed insults with a smile to a mother who would move mountains to protect her child. Life settled into new patterns. Ellis became a regular presence, doting on Aster and helping me navigate the legal complexities of the trust fund now established in her name. Together we used a portion of the released funds to create a small nonprofit providing legal assistance to women in custody battles. It's what my father would have wanted, Ellis explained as we filed the incorporation papers. He believed family money should help people, not control them. In the rare moments of quiet between work, motherhood, and building our new life, I sometimes thought about Geraldine. The package she delivered remained unopened on my bookshelf, a remnant of a chapter one wasn't quite ready to revisit. Then one day, 6 months after Aster's birth, Rowan called with strange news. I just got back from that yoga retreat in Sedona, she said. You'll never guess who was there. Who? Geraldine Walker, sitting alone at breakfast every morning, taking meditation classes, looking different, older, quieter. Did she see you? I asked. Yes, she nodded once, then looked away. Later I spotted her looking at a photo on her phone. It looked like an old family picture. Then she just turned it face down and walked away. I didn't know what to make of this information. Was Geraldine changing, reflecting, or just licking her wounds before planning her next move? Either way, it was no longer my concern. That evening, as autumn leaves drifted past our windows, I received an unexpected letter from Bennett's Aunt Margaret, the family historian who had always kept a polite distance from Geraldine's inner circle. Dear Ellie, she wrote, I wanted to thank you for your courage. The Walker family has operated under Geraldine's thumb for decades, each generation more fearful than the last. By standing firm, you've broken a cycle that has damaged countless relationships. Some call it a family curse, this need to control, to manipulate, to enforce rigid standards of worthiness. Perhaps now, with Geraldine's influence diminished, real healing can begin. That night I sat in the nursery rocker watching Aster sleep peacefully in her crib. On the wall above her hung a simple frame containing a poem my father had written years ago. I'd found it among his papers after his death. Its words now more meaningful than ever. When questioned, let your silence thunder. When cornered, let your truth be shelter. When broken, let your healing be rebellion. This is how we survive. This is how we triumph. As I traced the familiar handwriting with my fingertips, Aster stirred and made a small noise, not a cry, but a chuckle, her first real laugh. I leaned over the crib, watching in wonder as she giggled again, responding to some dream or passing thought in her developing mind. Hello, beautiful, I whispered, my heart so full it hurt. They tried to break us before you even arrived, but we built something stronger instead. Aster's tiny hand curled around my finger, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so small. In that perfect moment of connection, I realized we had both been reborn through fire, she into the world, and I into the woman I was always meant to be. The past would always be there with its painful lessons and hard-won wisdom, but the future belonged to us.